Welcome to the Smart Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Funk. My guest today has her PhD in astrophysics. Consequently, which makes sense, she's an astrophysicist at the Space Science Telescope Institute at Johns Hopkins. She ran in the Olympic marathon trials here in the U.S. in 2016, and we'll get to hear about a story about her running, or maybe not running, trying to qualify for the French national team for the half marathon this year in 2020. Welcome to the show, Julia Roman-Duval.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. I get going, and I should have said bienvenue à la podcast. But I didn't want to get too deep with the French, both because my listeners don't speak French, and because my French is very, very rusty at this point.
Your accent, it sounded pretty good on that bienvenue word, so.
Merci. So before we got going, I was asking you because you made the decision this year not to pursue the Olympic marathon trials again and to try to make the French national team in the half marathon. So the listeners get caught up with what happened, because I was reading the articles trying to figure out what happened with Julia. Give me a recap. What actually ended up happening?
So I trained throughout the winter preparing for this Paris half marathon, which was the qualifier for the French national team for the half marathon world championships, which were supposed to happen on March 30th in Poland. So I flew there. My parents drove to Paris, and then the evening before the race, we learned through the media that it was canceled because of the coronavirus pandemic, which was at the time just getting started in France. I think they had a cluster of 30 cases, not in Paris, but not too far from Paris, and so decided to just stop all running events, especially because there were a lot of people who traveled from overseas to race. It was a little bit late because we all had gone to the expo already.
Right.
But that's what happened. And so I missed the Olympic trials because they were the same weekend. So I was in France. I could not be at both. And so, yeah, it was a pretty major disappointment. I still don't regret the decision I made because it was the right decision. Given that, I'm almost 38 years old, probably have, another 4, maybe 5 good running years, hopefully. Which means I had to try a new experience and do everything I can to try to progress in my running career, quote unquote.
Right.
So yeah, that's the decision made sense. I had absolutely no regrets, but it was a tough pill to swallow, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, so what kind of hours are you up to training wise per week? I think I last saw in an article you were like 85 plus miles per week, but I mean, it's a considerable amount of time you're putting in.
A couple of hours a day, I would say, if you include, like strength work, cross training, and that doesn't include, driving to the track or shower or anything. So
yeah.
So yeah, I ramped up my mileage. I've been running since I was 31, so 6-7 years. And I every year I would try to get better and increase the mileage a bit. I suppose all the way through 2018, I was, hovering around 70 a week at my peak mileage for a marathon, which is not a lot compared to, I guess, the other ladies who train at my level.
Right.
But I have 3 kids and a busy job, so you got to do what you got to do. It was more focused on quality.
Yeah.
But then for Chicago last October, I decided to try something new, and so I increased considerably. I think I went all the way to 92 miles in 6 days. Doubling, of course, and that worked really well because I was in the best shape I'd ever been. And so I tried that again for Paris, although it was a little different because it was a half marathon. So I guess the balance of speeds were different.
Right.
But it's been working out fine, and I work around it's more than 40 hours a week, really. And my kids are all elementary school, so there's, they're not toddlers, but they're not that big either. So they
Right.
really need me for everything. And so there's a big workload there. So I think 95 was, it's kind of pushing it. It was doable, but
Hmm.
I wouldn't train more than 12 weeks like this. I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Does the workload gets to be crushing? And so like I don't have any kids, so it's hard for me to really understand. Like I can understand if you say, okay, it's this many hours and that many hours, but living it is a different experience, right? Because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you get home from work, you get the workouts, the kids are not going to just be like, okay, like mom's tired. Like we'll not be rambunctious. Like we'll just hang out.
Uh, they're pretty good. Then no, right? But it's there's a workload independent of dealing with the emotional parts of it, right? Like you
Yeah,
have to cook 3 lunches in the morning with 3 snacks, and then pack them up, and then do all the laundry, which is twice a day for us because they're sporty kids.
yeah,
All that stuff, like cleaning the house, doing groceries, helping with homework, all that. So it's just even if you count just the hours, it's a lot. It's also a lot of interruptions, right? Like
right.
if I'm trying to finish some work at night, when they're still awake, but mom, I'm hungry, or I don't know what to do, I'm bored, I don't know which book to read,
Hmm.
so that kind of thing, which is fine. I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way, but it is it adds up.
So it makes me wonder, like, do you have a really prescribed schedule every day where you're like, this is the time that this happens and this is, or is it just a matter of you have a schedule and then you have all the interruptions?
We have Well, the schedule is basically I get the run out of the way first thing in the morning
Hmm.
because there will be no other chance during the day. And usually that's before everybody wakes up.
Hmm.
Um, and then, from day to day, my work schedule varies a bit, but the core hours are like roughly 9:30 through 5, and I have a bunch of meetings, telecoms right now, really. Um, and then after that, the kids have activities that are on a set schedule too. So at least that's set, and then we're flexible after that, depending on whether what they want to do or anything like that.
Yeah. So I think you kind of mentioned this, and it's something I don't think we take into account enough is like the emotional load of everything, right? Because there's the stress of, there's just a stress of training. I have to think about if you're doing you said it was only 12 weeks, but 90 hours, you're probably working out somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 hours a week, depending on what kind of, how
Yeah,
that
more like
mileage is
15.
structured. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Yep.
like, if it's more speed work, then you're going to have a longer time. You got to get to the track. You got to rest intervals. So, 15 hours on the one hand, if you compare that to a work week, you're like, okay, well, you have 40 hours of work week, but 15 hours of working out takes an emotional toll on you, you know?
Definitely.
And so I always wonder how different people cope with like the emotional load of everything. I know I have friends who, when we were training, or there, some of them still are in that kind of load or higher. It was like maybe they'd have a go-to food, like they loved peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or they loved ice cream or whatever, and that was their, you know, relaxation moment, I guess, or like bit of reward. Do you have any methods or like go-to items to kind of make yourself feel better after a long day?
Yeah, a few. They're just little things. I love chocolate, and I will forget how much chocolate I'm eating if I'm training very, very hard.
Yeah.
The good stuff too, the Lindt and Toblerone.
Hmm.
I usually work after the kids are asleep to catch up a bit. And so usually like around 9, 10 p.m. And after that, if I need to wind down, obviously. So
Hmm.
I'm always glad to have some series to watch on Netflix or Hulu, whatever. 20 minutes, no more, so I don't lose too much sleep.
Yeah.
But I absolutely need that because I can't have a good night of sleep if I transition straight from like work to sleep.
Yeah.
So that's very helpful.
I was reading that you, on average, are only getting like 6 to 7 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah, it's not enough.
No,
Yeah.
it's not enough.
No, but I've been able to function that way. And I mean, the main reason, right, is because usually I'll catch up with work until like 9:30, 10 p.m. And then I
Hmm.
still have a bit of strength to do, shower, talk to the hubby, and I'm in bed at 11, wake up at 5:30. So, um, however, on Saturdays, that Saturday is the day I do my long run. So I wake up early, I get in, 2 to 3 hours of running, makes me extremely sleepy. And so the
Yeah.
kids know, and Saturday at 1 p.m., they know mom will disappear and she'll take a 2 hour nap, and we
Mm.
cannot not be loud. So they're really actually really good about this. They respect that, and they're always, chilling in their rooms reading books or watching a movie or something. I do not hear them for 2 hours Saturday afternoons, and so that's a bit rejuvenating, refreshing.
Yeah.
I know if I don't get my Saturday nap, I will not have a good week after that. But yeah, I mean, it's challenging. Some days, I just roll out of bed, start running, and I'm like, oh gosh, I can't do this.
Yeah.
This is too hard. But when I have my eyes on the prize all the time, right? This is my goal. This is what I want to do, and I know what it takes to get there. And so that's super motivating. But it is also important to have those downtime throughout the year, right? You can't be sharp and fit 12 months a year. And so I let
Right.
myself rest both mentally and physically after a big season or marathon or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah. That's something I think a lot of people like to forget, or maybe some amateurs like to forget, is that there is you can't maintain that absolute peak fitness all the time. As much as you want to, it's just the stress load would be too high to try to maintain. You break yourself down. Like I know in the last few years, my coach has finally convinced me after whatever the peak is for the season. This season is out the window, so who knows when that'll actually be. Um, we'll take like 3 weeks completely off, no workouts at all. And I've noticed that that's helped me really be mentally ready to go again when we
Exactly.
start training again. Instead of taking that 3 weeks and saying, I'll run light or I do triathlon. So maybe I'll get in the pool a little bit. It's just trying to maintain some fitness. The benefits mentally, not even accounting like physically, the benefits outweigh any kind of benefit you'd get trying to maintain some fitness in that time for me. Do you have time? Are you talking about time off completely, or do you still do
No,
something?
a hybrid, right? So the for 1 week I will not run at all
Right.
after a marathon, but I will be in the pool the day after, and not because I'm trying to maintain fitness, but because it makes me feel good and
Yeah.
happy. So there's really no pressure for fitness or anything. It's just pure pleasure. I'll hop on the bike a little bit maybe. And then a week after that, maybe I'll start running very easy, but again, just so I can run with my friends, be outdoors and just
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it. And I'll go like this for, yeah, I guess 3 weeks after the marathon. And it doesn't induce stress at all. It's just
Yeah.
about, feeling good, having a good day, socializing while
Mm-hmm.
exercising. And I know especially the pool after a tough race. I mean, sometimes, the day after the marathon, I get in the pool, I feel like I'm 100 years old. I'm not kidding. And then I
Yeah.
get out, it's like, okay, I'm 50 now. It's much better, right?
Yeah.
So it's great for recovery.
Yeah. It's
So
like
I
low
do
impact.
swim at least once a week, actually.
Yeah. So I guess we have to back up. So I was reading that you swam a little bit competitively growing up, right?
A bit, yeah. Uh,
And then your introduction to endurance sports was with triathlon.
Yeah, correct.
Now I have a bone to pick with you. I think I read you mentioned you were getting really bored doing so. Like you were doing really well in triathlon, but you were bored. So how did you end up being bored when there's like you have three sports to keep up with? There should be enough variety. So why was that boring?
I think the main point is I was training by myself. I did
Okay.
not have a team. I didn't have anybody. And I guess when I said that and I got bored is after I actually met this amazing running team, which it was a complete life changer. But suddenly I was discovering what it's like to train with friends and teammates.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess compared it to my solo training, which ultimately just felt very boring after the fact.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was coming from. Yes, I think triathlon itself is far from boring, but the training setup I had was not very good.
Yeah.
And part of it is too that when you, I mean, I'm very busy, right? And training for 3 sports meant that I couldn't follow anyone's schedule or anything,
Right.
which meant solo training was the way to go. And I found that focusing on one sport but getting better quality out of it by joining a team and doing a more structured training, thanks to partly having motivation from a team showing up every day,
Mm-hmm.
was much more productive, more fun.
Yeah. See, like I'm I'm totally with you. I get it now. Because I came from, I did sports growing up in school, ran in school, and then ran on scholarship in college. And I definitely, when I had transitioned from having that team to no longer having the team, it's a very tough transition. So going the other direction, I can see how you'd be there's no way I'm going back to just
Exactly.
by
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot more sense. I was just like, it, because most people, if they're going to say like one direction is boring over the other, it's one sport, because people are like, oh, I like variety and there's all so many things to do. So I just wanted to know how you ended up at that decision. Um, so
And
for
I think it's also that after a while, like you do the same sport for 10 years,
mhm.
like it feels good to try something new.
Yeah,
And I think related to that, I maybe it's the just being home all the time during the pandemic, but I felt myself adrenaline deprived. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, right? And so
okay,
I picked up mountain biking and skateboarding, and I'm like, okay, this is fun. Maybe I could stop running and do this, And I'm not gonna do that because I love running too much, and it's freedom, right? You just need your shoes and you can go. But
yeah,
I have had a lot of pleasure actually going out mountain biking in neighboring state parks and things like
mhm.
that. And a change is good. It's refreshing, and it's good cross training too. So
So are you like, what? So what's the long term plan? Are you like, once you retire from running, you're just going to start taking up all these other sports and then seeing if you can dominate them, or
yeah. I don't think I'll ever quit running. I can't. And even when I was doing triathlon, I was not running much, but I was running a bit. I just has always been my favorite, swimming as well. But I've been thinking maybe trail running would
mhm.
be something different that I could probably take on, especially because the I guess the peak age for trail running is a lot later than for road running, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of people, women in particular, who do really, really well in their 40s on the trails. So yeah, that I've thought about that quite a bit actually. I think I do have some good years left on the road, and so
Yeah.
I want to, make the most of it. But beyond that, yeah, trail running would probably be one of them. And then mountain biking, I've been thinking about it too. I'm nowhere good with mountain biking. I just like it.
Yeah.
Just because it's fun. There's a good deal of adrenaline rush.
Mhm.
Uh, Going down hills through rocks and things like that. So yeah, and I always I want to be on the edge, trying new things. Um, just not settling in my little routine. I don't want
Yeah.
to do that.
So since you're thinking about trail, I always wonder where this gets started, and it doesn't seem like you're there yet. So, um, is there any temptation for starting to do ultras as you start thinking about trail?
Yeah. Yes, that would be so I grew up on Reunion Island, and there's I guess one of the most challenging ultras,
Okay.
which is the Grand Raid. It's it's you cross the island basically, which is about 2 mile high. So the elevation is super crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But I've watched these people do this, since I was a kid, and I always wondered, like, I wonder if I could do this, and I think ultimately, if I were to pick up trail running, that would be the end goal, is try to be competitive for an ultra like this.
That seems to be where people go. And there seems to be a division at a certain age. It seems like I see a lot of runners either stop running or really cut down on mileage, or they go, all right, now we're going the whole way. We're going like 50 milers, 100 milers, all that kind of stuff. It seems like there's plenty of, I guess since it's not where you grew up, how much time did you spend in France? I can't try to remember.
I left when I was 24 in 2006.
Okay. I was like,
Um,
I'm trying to remember. I know UTMB, Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc, is the big one that I can think of in that area. And
yeah,
I'm trying to
that's
think.
another one on the list. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've spoken with people who have done it, and a lady who was like getting ready to do it last year. I'm sure it's been canceled this year. So it just makes me wonder about. I think you probably have a lot of interesting scenery that you could get through in ultras, like in Europe, where you would be completely comfortable, traveling, maybe bringing the kids and being like, all right, we're going to go hang out for 40 hours and mom's going to run for a while.
Yeah, they would love that, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, France is just so beautiful and diverse in terms of sceneries, right? So I actually have done quite a bit of adventure racing in my
Okay.
college years. One of them was in the Pyrenees and one of them was in the Alps. And I think we were able to see things that only ultra runners could see, right? Because to
Mm-hmm.
get there, you have to run
Yeah.
or bike, mountain bike. And so that was just amazing. And I hope I can get back to that kind of thing in a few years. If anything, it's such an immense feeling of freedom when you're, at the top of the world and you get there with your own legs,
Mm-hmm.
no assistance. I don't know, you feel powerful and free, I suppose.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I take my family to France once a year generally, not this year unfortunately, but we go hike in the Alps. Um, we're all very outdoorsy, very adventurous.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure I would have a very strong support crew if I were to run the UTMB.
Yeah. And thinking about, I talk to people in general, just like, but people that don't run, and I talk about freedom a lot. That's the thing that motivated me. Like when I started running when I was 12, and there's just, I, I feel like the word freedom doesn't really capture the whole thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like,
I don't have a better word, but yeah,
yeah,
you have to experience it to know what you're talking about. Yeah.
it's like freedom is like the closest thing that you have, but there's something about, and I'm sure you've been in this, especially as you like to do the trail runs and the adventure races, where it's like you go for long enough that you kind of, your mind stops. So, and you're just moving. You're not all these thoughts floating around in your head anymore. You're just this
Invincible in a
motion.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
almost,
yeah, yeah,
almost.
yeah.
It's so hard to communicate that to people, and I'm not. I'm
Effortless would be another word that would
yeah,
come to mind. Yeah.
yeah. I wish there was some easier way to like share that experience with people. That maybe don't have the ability or drive to do it for themselves. Just to give them at least a glimpse, because like I said, freedom seems like such a limiting word to try to share such an all-encompassing experience.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So
I'll think of other words, but yeah, it's an experience. It's unique. Yeah.
this is a little bit of a detour, but um, thinking about, obviously, since you speak at least two languages, do you ever find that between the two, like there's something, you can express something in French, and then you're like, English just doesn't have the quite the right words to express it. I feel like I said, my French is not great, but I got, high enough in, or fluent in, not really fluent, but like, conversational enough to feel like there's some, you see the differences in how things are expressed. And then I at least realized with English, I'm like, the language itself has to be limiting us as humans in our ability to express things. So I didn't know if like you experience that more often, since you have a PhD, you work in astrophysics in English, so like clearly you speak at probably a C2 level. So it's, I just wonder how often you experience that.
All the time. I'm a very analytical person, and it's
Mm-hmm.
always been hard for me to put words on my emotions and my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very frustrating because I know what I'm feeling, but I just can't get it out.
Yeah.
And so it's gone both ways, right? So sometimes I have the perfect French word for it,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't find the English equivalent, and vice versa. Sometimes it just comes in English, and I'm like, I don't know how to say this in French.
Yeah.
For emotions, it's mostly I know in French and I don't know in English, and that's
Yeah.
probably because I grew up um, speaking French, right?
Right.
Whereas my work career was developed in English, and so all the technical words and things like that, I'm good with English. The emotions are more like the French.
Right.
But it sometimes I wish I could speak both because they would complement each other really well. Maybe I could get it together then. But yeah, it's not easy. I do think the English is a little better because it has more words
Right.
and you can form words, right? Which you cannot do in French. And
Yeah.
I think you can also visualize the English much better. It's to me that's a language that uses imagery quite a bit in
Mm-hmm.
its wording.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you, like I said, I'm not high enough level in French to have noticed or not noticed this, but so it's interesting. You said this. In English, you'll see say an advertisement for a company, and they'll smash two words together and make a new
Exactly.
word, and you already know exactly what they mean.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't do that in French. Yeah, so there are, and that kind of, composition of two words, I guess, which is one word in English. Sometimes there's just no way to express it in French. There's no
Yeah,
word, and so you kind of have to take a detour. So I find myself translating from French to English or English to French all the time.
and so again, this is we're going down a rabbit hole, but this is just, I'm way out of practice of French, so I'm just picking your brain. So do you speak with your kids in French? Are they fluent as well?
They are not, and the main reason is I am married to a Puerto Rican who is a
Okay.
native Spanish speaker.
Uh-huh.
However, I do not speak Spanish because I took German and Russian in school, and he doesn't speak French. So English is the way to go.
Okay.
And so for the kids, it was every time I try to speak French to them, they're like, "No, English, please. Why are you talk English to Daddy? Why are you speaking French to me?" Um, so I think if we had both been French speaking or Spanish speaking, it would have been a lot easier.
Yeah.
But the good news is every time we go to France or they interact with my family, they pick up a lot. So they know a little bit. They
Yeah.
can speak a few things. They understand more, but they're not fluent.
Okay. That's the thing. It's always a curiosity for me for like language blended families. Like my French teacher, like we just did it over teleconference. She lives in Honduras. She's from Quebec, and so she speaks French and English. And her husband is from Honduras, but is deaf. So he speaks. He doesn't. He like understands. He can read lips in Spanish, but he has sign language. So then, like her daughter will speak Spanish and maybe a little English, but no French. So it's just like it's always curious to me how parents choose or to what language is spoken in the home.
Yep, yeah. And I don't know that we consciously chose.
Mm-hmm.
It is also true that my kids are really close together. I have three, and
Yeah.
the oldest and the youngest are only 3 years apart. So the first few years of their lives, we basically had three babies,
Mm-hmm.
and having two busy jobs, it was a little challenging. And so when we told them, put your shoes on, they need to down right away, not having to repeat it like 5 times before they get it. And
Yeah.
so I think it was difficult at the time to teach them 2 or even 3 languages
Yeah.
that we have in our family.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we did what felt right at the time, I suppose.
Yeah.
I
Um,
wish they could speak French or Spanish, but
well, I mean, if you spend
and
more
they will
time,
probably. Yeah, they
yeah,
will.
it's like if you spend more time, and they're young. I mean, especially
Yeah,
like if they have the desire, like you're fluent in French. It's so much easier when you have somebody to speak with than if you're just gonna like
exactly.
sit in a textbook,
Yeah.
So they
Yeah, and
have
I
the
can
perfect
feel like my
resource.
youngest one she's pretty curious. She's
Yeah.
actually she's the one who will be the most open to speaking or listening to me in French.
You can just like start slipping a few words in there, like here and there, just casually, just transition, and then tell your husband to do the same. Just like slip some Spanish words in, and just see if
Yeah.
they can get really confused.
He actually has been picking up quite a bit. So he's gotten a lot better at it, and me with the Spanish as well.
Yeah, I
So
mean they're similarly rooted, so like it.
yeah, the problem is the Puerto Rican people speak very fast. So,
Yes.
I took a years of Latin, and obviously I know French. And so if you write the Spanish or if you talk slowly, I can understand, most words or at least the gist.
Yeah.
Uh, but when they speak fast, it's like, oh, one word. I can't tell when one word stops and the next starts. So like
Right.
that's a lot harder to understand.
Right. So then, where you grew up, was it French and English speaking, or did you have to learn English in school? Or how did that happen? I'm kind of
Uh,
worried, like figuring out
yeah,
your
it's
journey to here.
so French is in school, right? Well, so I grew up just speaking French only and taking, I don't know, it's a couple of hours a week of English,
Mm-hmm.
I suppose, starting the age of 10 or 11, and then throughout high school.
Okay.
And I like languages. I liked English, so I think I was pretty good and definitely serious about it. I also did German from the age of 11 through
Yeah.
18.
Yeah.
Although I have not spoken German since I left high school, so that's mostly gone. Although if I every time I go to Germany, it seems to pick up.
Yeah. It's kind of like buried. Um, I was just wondering about. So, how do you get from, I guess, where you grew up to then you moved back to France and then to the US at what was it, 24, 26?
24, yeah,
24. So, I mean, is it like it was graduate school, right?
correct. Yep.
So, where does that decision come in where you're like, all right, I'm going to go overseas for graduate school? I think about people here, some people do it, but it's not that common. And I don't know how common it is from people from, Europe to come over to the US for graduate school. So how does that decision come up in your life? You have to be, I have to think about this timeline. You're probably married by this time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're
No, not yet. No, I about to. It took a couple
okay.
of years later.
Okay. So we're all in this like confusing time frame. There's a lot of things going on. How do you decide to pick up and like, move across the pond as it were?
So well, it's I guess the continuity of a lifetime. But I'm from a family of parents who love to move, right? So
Okay.
even when we were in France, we'd move every 2 or 3 years by choice.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually lived in Normandy, in Brittany, in Grenoble, in Nice, in Toulouse, in Lyon, and then 7 years in Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean. And I think there we changed house like 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm not attached to anything, right? We would sell our stuff, pack our luggage, and go. And so I was doing double masters in France in astrophysics and aerospace engineering, with the aerospace engineering being a backup because I knew how hard it was to get a job in science. And I was very lucky to be the one Frenchie selected to participate in a program called the NASA Academy, which was run in conjunction between NASA and the French Space Agency. And so I applied, I got in, and so I spent 8 months in the US when I was 22, 23, I don't remember. So as an intern, actually working on instruments to image um, planets, Earth-like planets. And so it was a completely life-changing experience, right? I got to experience research in engineering in the US and how powerful and well-funded it is. I also met the person who is now my husband. And so after that, I went back to France with my head full of dreams, trying to finish my degrees. And so the natural continuation of that was, well, I have to go back. And so I got accepted actually the same grad school, Boston University, as my husband. And then we built a life here. But yeah, and I think it was a very smart move because research here is so much better funded than in France in particular. There's a lot more opportunities for jobs or PhD positions, all that stuff. And so I'm happy I made the move, and it wasn't difficult because I had been moving all my life, right? It's like, wow, it's just another place.
Yeah. So if you're moving all the time, are you attached to anything? I would assume maybe your husband and kids, but
not really. I mean, we've been in Maryland for 10, 11 years now. It's probably the longest I've lived anywhere, actually. I just realized. And we're settling nicely because we love our house, we love our neighborhood. The kids love their schools and their friends and their music teacher and taekwondo teachers. So I think we're getting there where we're starting to feel comfortable and don't really have a desire to move again. But I would be completely okay selling everything and going somewhere else if the opportunity was worse, right? We'll always want to move to something better,
right,
not regress. So we're always open to new opportunities, I suppose.
It's just always interesting to me, like how those kind of things growing up, influences how you end up, the things you end up doing later in life. Because it's like you move so often growing up, it probably made it easier to just say, okay, let's move to the U.S. to study and all these kind of things, versus somebody who say they I can't remember my French geography off the top of my head, but say they grew up in a small town in France and never moved. Like I feel like it would be less likely for them to be like, okay,
Yeah.
let's move to the
It would be
U.S.
terrifying, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think traveling and moving when you're a child gives you a perspective on the world that makes it, not scary at all. But if you do start moving around and traveling when you're an adult, I could see how that would be very scary.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about what kind of work you're doing at SSTI and the kind of research you do.
Right. So I'm a tenure track astronomer, and my time is basically split between two main functions. One is purely functional, right? I support the missions that STSEI runs, which are the Hubble Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, and the Roman Space Telescope. My particular position is with the Hubble, and so I work on one of the spectrographs on board the telescope, make sure it always works the best it can. Basically, it's on top of its calibration, and users are happy with it, gets good data, well calibrated, good quality. So that's about half my time. Right now, I'm also leading a very large program, actually the largest program ever executed with the Hubble. It's called Ulysses, and it's basically to get spectroscopy of most of the very massive stars that we know in the nearby universe. So that's my functional work. That's about half of it. And then the other half is my independent research. which in my case is on the interstellar medium. And so that's all the fluffy dust and gas that's between stars and galaxy. When you see like a nebula somewhere that's got all kinds of colors, that's what I study. And I studied from a mostly, chemical abundances point of view. So, what's the structure, what's the composition of this gas and dust? How much carbon, oxygen, silicon, iron is there? And why was it so, right? How did those galaxies get chemically enriched over time since the Big Bang? So in a nutshell, that's it. On day to day, it's a lot of reading, a lot of writing, a lot of communication, and a lot of coding, data analysis.
How much data do you get to pull from the telescopes? I spoke to, I don't know why, I just forgot her name, but she's studying Titan. And she was mentioning, I'd asked her about, how do all the telescopes get scheduled? How does everybody get access and we get to share like time on the telescopes and that kind of stuff? So like, how often do you personally get to end up pulling data for the research you're doing?
So it's how often, how much I can answer, right? So the way these work is you have to submit proposals, right? The programs are competitively selected. And so every year there's a proposal call, and then all the scientists around the world, not just in the US, can submit proposals, and then these get reviewed, and then a few get selected to actually fly on the telescope. And so when that happens, the observations usually execute within a year. And then they come down on the archive. You can just download them, and they're not quite science ready, but close. So personally, I've led so far 3 programs on this telescope, the Hubble, including 2 large ones. So the large ones, so Hubble orbits the Earth about every 90 minutes. While pointing away from the Earth at the sky. The programs I got were roughly 100 orbits, so it's about 150 hours. It's considered pretty large, right? So I'm actually writing a paper right now to summarize the results, which ended up being very interesting. I was actually working on this right before the podcast. And on my run this morning, because we made a very interesting discovery, I'm like, I don't understand it. I was totally obsessing. So miles like 5 through 9 are a blur, because I was just thinking about it, trying to figure out why are we seeing what we're seeing. And running's great for that, right? Like I let my mind wander, sometimes solve problems, but definitely always make progress.
Is that consecutive hours? Like you just like you get to say, I don't know, 150 hours. I'm trying to think how many days that would be. But do you get to say, okay, from the beginning of March until the 20th, like I get all of the hours of collection, or how does that get split up at all?
Yeah. So for most programs, I guess when it executes doesn't really matter. So there's a whole infrastructure at the Institute which handles the scheduling of observations. And usually they try to optimize things by position on the sky. So different objects are not always visible, right? So sometimes you have to wait until they're visible. And then I guess when it goes depends on how all the other programs are assembled in the schedule. On occasions, though, you will have time-constrained observations because, say, maybe Hubble and Chandra, which is the X-ray telescope, want to look at the same object at the same time. And so in this case, you can put constraints. You just, put it in your in the file that gets sent to the telescope. I want this to go during that time. And so mine were not time constrained. So over a year, they were scattered around, several months. But we always know when they always send you an email, say, hey, your data will be taken during that time. So you always know in advance when it's going to go.
Okay. So do you get it? Is it sent to you, I guess, piecemeal, like, hey, we've got 5 hours done. Here's that. And then here's the next chunk, or do you have to wait till they get the whole data set?
Yeah, so it's by piece, but we tend to look at things by target.
Okay.
Right. So for a given target, if it requires 2 or 3 orbits, it will all be taken at the same time. But if you really want to stare at the same object for 15 orbits because it's very faint, so you need a lot of exposure time, then it will probably be split between different, we call them visits, but really it's groups of data. And
Right.
you can set those to go back to back if that's necessary, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's not. So, one could go in November and the next one in January or something.
Okay. Um, the question I always have to ask, and this is for every researcher, regardless of what they're studying, is why does it matter that we know what's going on with all this stuff in space that's floating around that's not formed into anything?
So several reasons, right? I think long term it defines us as humanity. We are curious. We want to know where we came from and if we're alone. If there are, is there other kinds of life over there? Like, how did the universe form? Why do we have planet Earth and a solar system here?
Mm-hmm.
Are other galaxies like ours? Are other planets like ours? Um, I mean, I think it's an existential question in a sense. Like, I don't think we can help trying to address it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think long term, that's why hard sciences like mine will keep getting funded, because it's something that we have to do. But in the short term, there's um, all the science we develop, maybe not so much in astronomy, although for instrumentation, I think that would be true, have day-to-day applications, right? Like, for example, the research they're doing on the International Space Station. Sometimes you find a way to apply what you've learned in a way that's concrete, either in, I don't know, electronics or biochemistry or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And that's important. And you give people jobs to do research in a bunch of fields, and that can develop into completely unexpected applications. And development of new techniques, whether theoretical or actually applied.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, I mean, my husband works on climate change and stuff. I feel like this is more applicable day to day.
Yeah.
um but it is very important to understand where we come from and why we're here.
Yeah. Well, I think it's always an interesting conversation to have. I am personally more like applied minded. Like my undergrad degree is in theoretical math, which is to clarify that it wasn't like applied as in engineering. But I personally like working on projects where it's like I can see the end result of that project immediately with creating something or whatever. So then, but I also see the value in exploring for the sake of exploring. Partially because that's, I mean, I feel like that's part of who we are as humans, right? As you mentioned, but also because there are things that we would find that you wouldn't find otherwise if you weren't just going out and seeing what's there. Whether that means looking out into space or looking in the oceans or studying subatomic structure of things, whatever it is, like we find things and that ends up linking to something else that we didn't necessarily think. So I always feel like it's nice to hear from people like you who are doing this kind of research to see what you think about it and why it's important, beyond just being interested. Because as soon as you said you had found something, you're like, your face just lit up, you're so excited about it,
Yes.
like.
Well, and what you're saying is true at all levels, right? So from one scientific field to the next, it is true. But even within a given scientific field, let's say for astronomy, for me, my the research I do and the results I found for the interstellar medium sometimes inform people looking at galaxies that form right after the Big Bang.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's completely interconnected, right? Like, we were looking here at systems, and the knowledge now is so deep and broad at the same time that no single person can be an expert at everything.
Right.
And so some people would choose to study a particular, say, question or topic, but it always has implications for the rest of the system. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's important to always communicate with adjacent communities of scientists that study slightly different things, but yet there's interconnections that are important to consider. And so yeah, it's true at all levels.
So that you bring up a good point in that we kind of have to be so specialized now that you simply, like, one person's brain can't hold everything, right? So when you're talking about this system of learning, it will stay specifically within astronomy. But so we have this system of learning, and each person is devoted. Like I mentioned, I think Sarah Hurst, I think that's her name. I spoke to studying the weather conditions on Titan, and you're looking at the interstellar medium. Do you see a way to make it more efficient to share and connect knowledge between researchers to try to force those kind of connections where, this person could use the information that that you found? Is there any better way than what, kind of chance, I guess, that you would come across that?
Well, so there's several complementary ways, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes it's chance, but most of the time it isn't, right? So that's why
Okay.
we have peer-reviewed journals.
Right.
I think that publishing your research and your results in a way that is very well documented and reproducible and peer-reviewed is a critical aspect of that, because then it's out there for anybody to find, right? All you
Mm-hmm.
need is, even with Google, if
Right.
you search for the right keywords, you will find the paper.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of sharing of information is done that way. Conferences are another way. I do because I enjoy, but I feel like it's necessary for me to attend a few conferences a year, and I always choose some where I know I'm going to be able to talk to other communities that might be impacted by the research I'm doing, and vice versa. So there's a lot of that happening, and then I'm very lucky that my institute is actually a big place,
Mm-hmm.
so pretty much all the fields of astrophysics are represented. And so we have a lot of hallway conversations that
Okay.
sometimes spark new ideas, new projects, new proposals, because we ended up saying, hey, look, I found this. I was like, oh, what? Yeah, I've been trying to figure that out for a few months. And so we just keep going, and there's a new project, a new collaboration, and new results coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's extremely important. And I think that the current situation actually makes this very challenging, just because we're all working from home and we
Right.
don't have those spontaneous interactions anymore.
Yeah.
And same for conferences, right? We don't have coffee breaks to talk about whatever comes to mind.
Yeah.
But to me, it's a very important aspect of scientific research.
That's one thing I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wrote it down earlier and I got distracted. I was wondering, are you still able to access all the new data since you're working from home? Like, everything's all set up properly? You can still get all the new stuff?
Yeah, everything. We have all the infrastructure to do everything remotely. Actually, we there's a few people in the building right now who are essential, just because they have to send commands to the telescope and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
the vast majority of us are working flawlessly from home. The only real challenge is childcare, because you can't work efficiently. Well, fortunately, my kids are in a very small and safe summer camp now, but they
Mm-hmm.
were home for 3.5 months, and I,
Yeah.
I I barely got any work done.
Yeah.
So that's the main challenge right now. But other than that, yeah, things are going well. It's as I said, being isolated from collaborators and my postdocs. I mean, I talk to them on Slack or like other teleconferencing system or whatever,
Right.
but it's not the same.
Right.
Um, and so I think if it doesn't last for years, we'll be able to keep the momentum going. But even after a year, things are going to start getting a bit tough.
Yeah.
Keeping the momentum and the excitement and the motivation will get harder and harder.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the solution is. I mean, aside from figuring out how to deal with it so we don't go back to regular life, but I'm not sure what the solution is. Because like you said, it's sometimes it's those unscheduled conversations. You're passing somebody in the hall, and it's almost a
Yeah.
spontaneous occurrence versus like us talking on the podcast. This is a time scheduled thing. We set up a time to get together to talk, and it's not the same. I mean, we're having just a normal conversation, but it's not the same as just like hey John, what are you working on? How you doing? That kind of stuff.
Yep. Well, your cross section with other people is just much larger when you're in person, right? Because
Right.
otherwise you have to choose who you want to talk to and reach out.
Right.
It's not random.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not chance.
Yeah. All right, Julie, we're starting to run down on time. So there's a question I'm asking everybody this year because it really kind of runs the gamut, and it's another experiential question. I'm curious everybody's answer to. So I like to ask you, what do you think the purpose of sport is?
The main one, do I get only one or can I
You
say
can
so?
whatever you want to say, and you can give
Okay.
multiple answers. It can be personal, it can be broad, however you want to answer it.
Okay. So from my own point of view as the athlete, right? I would say it's it's a way of life, right? It's a lifestyle. And so I know I can only be happy and feel good about myself if I exercise every day.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I guess positive energy, like the
Mm-hmm.
people who live with me are also in the same boat, right? They all exercise as well, but like everybody is relaxed and happy and having a good time because of, well, thanks to sports, really. That's not everyone's lifetime, and that's lifestyle, and that's fine. But I think for us, it's that's what it is. It's a lifestyle that just makes us happy.
Mm-hmm.
um I could see how, from an outside point of view, like, someone watching athletes, there's a big entertainment part, right? I guess sports team
Mm-hmm.
also, and I guess that's when we have major competitions like the Olympics or anything. Yeah, it's great for the athletes because that's pretty much the competition of their lives, and the adrenaline's running high, and it's a huge challenge. But also for the people watching, it's super entertaining
Yeah.
and inspiring in a way. So you can kind of share your love for the sport, and hopefully it will be contagious.
Yeah.
I do think the whole world will be a much happier place if everybody had in their routine to do a bit of exercise
Mm-hmm.
every day. It's a good stress relief method, and keeps you strong, mentally sane. And I know I make bad decisions if I haven't had my workout. Like the thoughts in my head are all jumbled up. I can't think clearly.
Mm.
And I may get more irritable or just not communicate as effectively. And I know sports can help a lot with that. And so perhaps if everybody were to work out in the morning, uh, we would have like a happy, smoothly going country. I don't know. I do think it would help.
Yeah. Well, maybe when you can get some extra time, we'll work on trying to figure out how to get everybody to exercise exercise in the morning. That's going to be a task.
I've tried, and sometimes successfully. Like, I think leading by example, it
Yeah.
really works.
Right.
I know after I ran the Baltimore Marathon, I think it was, I don't know, there was a lot of excitement in Baltimore, and I had a few people reach out to me and say, "Hey, I had not been on the treadmill for 5 years, and after seeing the race, I decided to give it a try, and I had a super good time." So,
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, people were inspired and, I guess happy as a result. They had something new in their life to try and to make them feel good about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah. No, I
one of
think
my
it's
goals is to try to get people to enjoy sports. I coach a few people, for free, just because
yeah.
I want to see them grow in the sport and enjoy
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like a community effort, and you'll see, like, I live in a community that's fairly active. You see people out walking their dogs, out running all the time, out on bikes, and you don't necessarily see that everywhere. So I think you're right. There's probably some kind of effect there with that lead by example. Like, if somebody goes out, somebody else sees it. Hey, maybe I should do that or do something,
Yeah.
and that kind of spreads.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Julia, if people want to figure out kind of what you're up to research wise, what you're doing, running, is there any place they can see you, follow you, any of that kind of stuff?
So I have a public Facebook page. It's mostly for running updates, although in the last few months there haven't been much. But um, in general, I think that would be a good way.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I think. I mean, there's stuff coming up on the STSCI website for my institute regularly, and if I have like work results or anything, they would be advertised there.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm not huge on doing social media myself, so I totally understand. But I always like to,
Yeah,
give
I'm
people a
not huge
chance.
either. That's
Yeah.
why. Yeah, like the public Facebook page I had to create because I keep my private page very private
Yeah.
for family and close friends, and I had dozens of requests
Yeah.
weekly, and I couldn't accept them because that's not how I guess keep my private life. But
Right.
the public page is not a whole lot of work, and I know it helps with this leading by example thing also. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for spending some time today with me, Julia. I hope you have a good weekend.
thanks. Yeah, you too.